Hey, good morning, Commission Church. I am glad that you are safe and warm at the comfort of your home. Thanks for tuning in this morning. I know that you are probably now watching the beautiful snowflakes that is descending upon Kansas City, and our first major snowstorm is hitting us, and that's why we decided to keep you safe and warm and cancel our services. So just wanted to give you a heads up about today. Thank you for joining us online. Just want to also remind you that we are postponing our membership class, and we'll start that next Sunday, January 12th from 9 to 9:45. Join us, and then service starts at 10:15. So just to let you know about that, we're looking forward to you being a part of our membership class next Sunday from 9 to 9:45. Also, since we're not meeting, we as a church desperately need you to continue to be faithful to God in your giving. So if you would like to give, just go to commissionchurchkc.com/giving, and you can give online, or you can bring it with you on Wednesday at 5 p.m. when we have our prayer service from 5 to 6 p.m. here, or you can mail it in to Commission Church, 11801 East Bannister Road, Kansas City, Missouri, 64138. And of course, you can bring it with you this coming Sunday, January 12th, when you come and join us here at Commission. We also want to let you know, just because we're not meeting together this Sunday, we want you to start our 21-day fast and prayer beginning this Sunday, January 5th, lasting through January 26th. We want to start the new year committing this time to the Lord as we fast and pray together as a community. So just want to let you know about that. And I hope that you will understand that although we are not meeting in person, just want to tell you that this time where you're watching our service online, just want to caution us that this is a teaching moment for us as a community, that our online presence is not a replacement for church. And what do I mean by that? Well, I think it's important in Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. The writer of the book of Hebrews reminds us that we ought not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together as a custom of some were, because he says that this is a way for us to spur one another to grow in Jesus. And so what am I trying to tell you? Well, it's important because I think our world and our culture today thinks that church is no longer meaningful in their lives. And that's not the way God intended it to be. The church functioned in the book of Acts as a vibrant community, but it wasn't just as a vibrant community, but there was a incarnate presence of God in what we just experienced this last month as we celebrated Christmas, that God in the person of his Son, incarnate in his Son, came to the world to be amongst us. And that's the same thing that is the important message of what church is, that we as a community gather together, and the incarnate presence of God amongst us is so vital in our growth and our discipleship and our accountability together as followers of Jesus. And so although we are able to experience church in a small way as you are watching through video, that is not what church is. It is a gathering of the followers of Jesus in community where we experience fellowship and encouragement and joy and celebrating together the body of Jesus, and be able to hear a prophetic word and inspired word in the gospel, the good news that comes as we are gathered together and part of the body, and we meet together and understand that God is amongst us. So just I want to let you know that our online experience is not the church. So I'm going to encourage you next Sunday to come join us in person here at Commission Church, starting at 10:15, to come together as the body of Jesus to celebrate the good things that he will do for us and through us in 2025. I think I find it very interesting, church, that we begin the brand new year of 2025 with a snowstorm. Now, I don't know if most of you know me. You know that I'm pretty much a very rational and scientific kind of a guy, and I see things pretty much black and white. And it's interesting that we begin 2025 as a preaching team talking about the book of Daniel. You see, Daniel isn't just a story of some ancient dude that lived faithful to God. Rather, I think that Daniel is a blueprint for us as we navigate our world today with so many challenges. And how do we face those challenges? We face them with courage, we face them with conviction, and we face them with hope. So I think it's kind of ordained and divinely inspired that in a middle of a snowstorm, in a world that is rapidly changing, here today at Commission Church, we're going to talk about Daniel's story and how Daniel provides practical lessons for us on how to live boldly for God in the midst of cultural pressure and moral compromise and total uncertainty of life. And Daniel is going to teach us some timeless lessons about staying faithful to God in a world that often opposes him. So I love this because in Daniel chapter 7, notice what Daniel says in Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14. And you're going to find this because we've connected on our email an overview of the book of Daniel, and you can download that. And if you'd like, you could go on commissionchurchkc.com/sermons, and you can find our slides for today's sermon. So in Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, Daniel writes, God's kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. You think about that, because when we read those words, it assures us that God is in control even when history and your present situation doesn't see it. And Daniel encourages us to persevere when we go through trials. And when we read Daniel, he inspires us with hope in regards to God's eternal plan. So I tell you all the time here at Commission, a text without a context is a pretext. So let's go through Daniel in an overview fashion. First of all, who wrote the book? So when we see the book of Daniel, we understand that the person who wrote the book is Daniel himself. And it's a product of his time in Babylon as a Jewish exile from Israel. So as a context, in about 605 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon conquered Jerusalem and exiled many of the Jews, including young nobles like Daniel and his friends. And the exile was God's judgment for Israel's persistent sin, including idolatry and failure to follow God's covenant. And we find that in scriptures like 2 Kings chapter 24 and 2 Chronicles chapter 36. And as a young person, Daniel lived through the transition of power from Babylon to the Medo-Persian Empire under King Cyrus in 539 BC. So there is this like 70 years worth of exile that Daniel lives through beginning as a teenager. So once Daniel arrives and the leadership of Babylon sees him, they totally transform his identity by, first of all, changing Daniel's name from Daniel to Belteshazzar. in an effort to completely identify him with his new home. And as a matter of fact, we know Daniel's friends not with their given Jewish names, but rather with their Babylonian names like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So what we see is that Daniel lived throughout this 70-year captivity and became one of 3 administrators over the provincial governors throughout the kingdom. He rises in power as an exile in Babylon. So that's who wrote the book. So where are we now? Where are we? Well, the Babylonians exiled the group containing Daniel and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to the cultural center of their empire, the city of Babylon, in 605 BC. And as a matter of fact, this was part of 3 deportations. In 605, 597, and 586 BC, the Babylonians carried out in Israel, subduing Jerusalem and the unfaithful king Jehoiakim. And Daniel and his friends were immersed in Babylonian culture, which was steeped in idolatry, polytheism, and focus on human achievement. And they were immersed in Babylonian literature, language, and cultures. Why? Because they were doing this so that they could have these Jewish teenagers growing up to be men to serve the king's court. And it presented an incredible challenge for Daniel and his friends to keep their Jewish identity and their faith. So here he is, Daniel, as a teenager, finding himself in the midst of a strongly polytheistic religious culture, meaning that he had ample opportunities to fall into error. However, given all those opportunities, he stood firm in his faith amongst this incredible culture opposed against his own belief in God. And he withstood the persecution and stood firmly in his faith. So the question begs us, why is Daniel so important for us? Well, Daniel is one of the few books of the Bible that takes place during a period of judgment. Many books in the Bible foretell judgment or look back into it, but Daniel takes place in the middle of judgment in a foreign nation. And the book of Daniel makes it clear that the one true God is the supreme ruler over heaven and earth. And when all seems lost and the consequences of sin seem overwhelming, we can understand that God is still sovereign. I want to tell you today that here's our big idea, that the book of Daniel stands as a unique mix in the Old Testament. While it begins with history and makes a strong transition at chapter 7 where it contains future events significant to the Jews, Daniel gives us a timeline of when Israel's Messiah would appear and the events that would follow that. So that in both historical and prophetic sections, Daniel presents a strong case for the absolute sovereignty of God, even over a multiple absorption of foreign powers that overcomes the Jewish nation. Think about that today. What is going on in your life where you feel like things are out of control? Where you yourself have no control of what's happening in your own life? I'm here to suggest, like Daniel is suggesting to all of us, that in the middle of life's uncertainties, in the middle of things that are just going wrong and things that could go wrong are going wrong, when all the prayers that you prayed haven't been answered and trials come your way and it feels like God isn't there and you aren't being listened to, and then fear sets in and shame sets in because you make decisions that aren't pleasing to the Lord, and you face the ramifications of those decisions. I'm here to suggest, as Daniel is suggesting to all of us, that ultimately you and I have to totally have faith in the God who is sovereign. That God is in control of your life. He is in control of the nation of Israel and his people. He is in control of the future and what he wants to do through them and in them. As much as you feel today that things aren't in your control, God still controls your life. And whatever happens in your life, God knows, and he loves you and cares about you, and he is not distant from you. Rather, he is fighting for you and knows exactly what you need. I think for all of us today, we have to understand this idea of sovereignty, this theme of sovereignty that occurs in numerous occasions throughout the book of Daniel. Think about this. God is sovereign when? God is sovereign when he delivers Daniel from the lion's den. God is sovereign when? When God delivers Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel from the fiery furnace. God is sovereign when? God is sovereign when the future arrival of the Ancient of Days to save his people from the forces of evil will occur. This is God's sovereignty in action in the life of Daniel, and it shows us that God is sovereign and he is moving in your life and in mine. So, what are some of the key themes that we see in the book of Daniel? When you go through the overview page that we sent you, you'll find each of the key themes broken up by chapters. For example, chapter 1, the key theme is living faithfully in a foreign culture. And the key verse is Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. Daniel resolved not to defile himself. And the application for that is that you and I should stay true to our values despite society's pressure, and that our small acts of integrity can have big impacts in our life. So if you look through the overview that we provided, and if you want to print it out, when you come to church this coming Sunday, we'll have it printed out, and you can grab that. Every chapter gives you a section. It gives you a key theme, a key verse for that chapter, and a practical application for us today. So let me just give you an overview as we talk about this. I won't go through that today in this video, but I just want to wrap it up in some kind of bigger items for us to understand the key themes in the book of Daniel. First, the key theme of being faithful even when you are in exile. And we see that in Daniel chapter 1 all the way through Daniel chapter 6. Daniel and his friends, teenagers who were taken captive to Babylon, remained faithful to God even when they were surrounded by a culture that celebrated values contrary to their own. And it's important for us today because you and I face a world and a society that is contrary to God. And it is easy for us to bend the corners on truth and to find that as our norm, when in fact what God is asking us is to stay firm in our commitment to Him, even if it costs us a promotion. And you and I need to understand that God wants us to be faithful even when we are under persecution. Another big area for us, or another big theme in Daniel, and I've suggested already for us, is God's sovereignty. In Daniel's interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, revealing that earthly kingdoms will rise and fall, but both of these kingdoms are under God's control. Even when that he's being thrown in the lion's den, him and his friends are thrown into the fiery furnace. Daniel understands that in those situations, in his own personal life, God is sovereign and he controls Daniel. So for us today, we need to remind ourselves to trust God, to trust him in his sovereignty. And it doesn't matter whether it's a global pandemic. It doesn't matter whether your career is shortened because of a cut in your business or your organization. It doesn't matter when kids are kind of like going out of control and it feels like what you're teaching them isn't finding root. You and I need to understand that we need to be faithful to God. We need to understand that God is still in control when we feel like life is out of control. Another thing, big theme in the book of Daniel, is that Daniel and his friends were courageous in the face of persecution. Sometimes openly responding to your inner beliefs can cost you. So Daniel's habit was to pray openly. And when it was illegal, it landed him in a lion's den. And yet, he wanted to be faithful to God. And he found courage in the middle of persecution. You and I need to understand that when we are faithful to the Lord, God gives us courage to face persecution that comes into your life. And I don't know what your lion's den looks like, whether it be being ostracized because you hold to biblical views, or you might find yourself getting a backlash on social media because you express views that are God's views, or whether or not you speak a truth in love, and it requires you to be courageous when speaking that truth in love might cost you a promotion or might cause family members to be offended. Either way, God is calling us to be courageous. He's calling you and I to not buckle under pressure. You see, friends, courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means choosing faith over fear. Like Daniel remained steadfast in his convictions, knowing that God would see him and honor his faithfulness. Courage under persecution. And then I think the last theme we find in Daniel in chapters 7 through 12 is God's eternal kingdom. I want you to know today that the kingdoms of this world will rise and fall. We all know this. History always repeats itself. Think about this. Think about the powers of history. Every historical power, every nation, every historical leader who rose up in power fell. But Daniel reminds us in Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, his kingdom, God's kingdom, will never be destroyed. You see, friends, our country is a great country, but our country will not last forever. God's kingdom will last forever. And Daniel reminds us that God's eternal kingdom will indeed last not only forever, but it will reflect the beauty of the God who reigns over that kingdom. And so as we walk through Daniel, we're going to be reminded today that Daniel understands. I love this. Daniel chapter 8, verse 25. Every oppressive power will be destroyed, not by human power. What is Daniel saying? He's saying, ultimately, God is in control, God is sovereign, and every kingdom will be demolished. Why? Because God wants to set up his eternal kingdom. That reminds me that I just kind of want to go back and tie what I said earlier in this message. And it's this. I tend to think about life through my own lens and my own perspective, and it is black and white. And I love this because Daniel provides for us a picture of what is happening in a world that we don't see. In Daniel chapter 9 and Daniel chapter 10, Daniel is praying, and ultimately what we see is that there is a battle in this spiritual realm that Daniel doesn't see because what he's praying about isn't answered. And in Daniel chapter 9, Daniel writes, "We do not make requests because of our righteousness, but because of your great mercy." See, friends, you and I aren't coming to God because of what we did. You and I are coming to God because of what Jesus did for us. And the writer to the book of Hebrews writes for us today that we have grace in the time of need so that we can come boldly before his throne and ask him. Why? Because we have a high priest who is touched with the feeling of our infirmities. He understands us and knows us. And because of his great work, his great sacrifice, once and for all, we can come up and make our requests to God because of his great mercy to us. And so Daniel is praying and asking God to meet his need. And all of a sudden, Daniel shows us that there is this incredible spiritual battle in the heavenly realms, and there is a fight that he doesn't see. And in Daniel chapter 10, verses 12 and 13, Daniel writes, "Do not be afraid. Your words were heard, and I have come in response to them." And that's a text that talks about when Daniel began to pray to God, his prayers were immediately heard by God, and God was responding to Daniel's prayers. And there was this incredible spiritual battle, and we're going to talk about that. But the main theme that I want to get through as an overview today is that there is an incredible spiritual battle happening in your life and in mine and in our world today. Paul writes, and he reminds us, we battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and rulers and wickedness in heavenly places. So Paul reminds us today that you and I are engaged not just in a physical world, but there is a greater reality present among us of a spiritual battle that is being engaged, and you and I must be faithful even though we can't see that. So today, I want us to understand a couple of things, okay? And why this matters for us today. Why are we studying the book of Daniel? Well, first of all, we find ourselves in the middle of faith and culture. And when faith and culture collide, as followers of Jesus, we have to understand Daniel's story, and it reminds us that it's possible for us to engage culture without compromising our faith. It's also important for us to understand that Resilience in the middle of uncertainty is possible for those of us who follow Jesus. Christians constantly face change. We constantly face problems, difficulties, trials. But the book of Daniel reminds us that when we place our trust, our unshakable trust in a sovereign God, God will offer for us a roadmap for us to navigate life's uncertainties. Trusting God, whether it's in finding a job in an unpredictable economy, or whether or not it's trusting Him with our next steps, is akin to Daniel trusting God in the middle of his exile in Babylon. And then finally, I think it's important for us to understand that purpose and hope is what people are searching for each and every day. And the book of Daniel shows us that our purpose is rooted in glorifying God, not in our external success. And you and I today find our ultimate purpose and our hope in a God who is in control and is sovereign in each of our lives, in your life and in my life. So, let me just give you some quick practical applications and we'll end our time together. The first thing is, I think we need to be countercultural. As a church, you and I need to live distinctively as a follower of Jesus in a culture that prioritizes self over God. Second, I think we need to be praying boldly. Daniel's habit of prayer was his lifeline. He set a time daily to seek God. And you and I today must do the same. We must pray boldly and set a time daily to seek the Lord. We need to act with integrity. We need to refuse compromise. And we need to understand that our values in the workplace or in relationships or in any area of our life must stand firm. We need to honor God in the small things, and He'll guide us in those things that are big and huge in our life. And then finally, I think you and I need to live with eternity in mind. Live with an eternal focus. Remember that your ultimate citizenship is not in our nation, but our ultimate citizenship is in God's kingdom. Invest in things that have lasting value, like relationship, like discipleship, like justice. Invest in a community of believers like Commission Church. So live with eternity in mind. So as we follow the book of Daniel in the next few weeks, I want us to see how Daniel speaks to us powerfully, especially as followers of Jesus living in a fast-paced, uncertain, and pressure-filled world. You and I can stand firm in our faith, trust in God's sovereignty, and live courageously with eternity in mind. And like Daniel, friends, you and I are called to be light in a dark world and a testimony of God's faithfulness and power in our lives. Thanks so much for tuning in today, and we look forward to seeing you in person at Commission Church next Sunday at 9 to 9:45 for our membership class, and then at 10:15 for our service. God bless you, and I hope you continue to stay warm and stay safe.